welcome to the first of its kind joint summit on homelessness with our Cal City colleagues. I'm Chuck Washington, Riverside County's 3rd District Supervisor and President of the California State Association of Counties. Thank you. Don't get too excited, it's only a 1-year term. So it's not like I'm going to be here for 3 more years. For context, Riverside County is the 4th largest county in the state with 2.5 million residents and is the 2nd fastest growing county in the nation, only behind Maricopa County in Arizona. Homelessness is a crisis that we all know we share and must work together to address. There's no other way to go about this. Thankfully, many counties and cities have already forged local plans that bring together cities, tribal governments, continuums of care, housing authorities, managed care plans, and community-based organizations. Just within my district alone, we've hosted multiple homelessness summits where we bring our city partners together with county staff to share local best practices, address concerns, and ensure that connections to resources are made. Working together is the only way to make progress, but we have more work to do. This is only the beginning. These conversations are only the beginning, right? We can't leave it here in this room. That is why I'm so excited for the lineup of speakers we have here today. And so for now, I'd like to hand it over by introducing Cal City's president and my friend now, Ali Taj, to get us started and take the mic from here. Thank you.
Thank you, President Washington. Let's give it up for President Washington. And good afternoon, everyone. It's absolutely my pleasure and honor to serve you as your president for Cal Cities. But as I look around the room, I see county officials as well as city officials working together for one common cause for our great city of California, which is getting rid of this challenge that we have, which is homelessness. So I'm so very happy to see that we are working together, but at the same time I have a mixed feeling that we should not have this issue. In the great state of California, which is the 4th largest economy of the world, we should not be fighting for this. We should be leading in so many ways, which we do throughout the state and throughout the world. With that, I just want to say what President Washington said. We are in the business of serving. We are in the business of changing lives, and that's what we do. And that's a great business to be in. Every local government official in this room understands the urgency and severity of our homelessness crisis. Cities and counties in every corner of the state are at the forefront of this emergency, providing shelter, services to our unhoused residents. Today's convening is so important as we come together to work proactively on one of our state's greatest challenge. I look forward to today's conversation with my peers at federal level, city level, colleagues at the county level, the Newsom administration especially, and state lawmakers on how we can work together at every level of the government and we can bring people off the street and put a roof over their head. With that, thank you all so very much for being here. I'm going to introduce the Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg as our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am Darrell Steinberg, the mayor of Sacramento. Welcome to the capital city. Today I love so much. I deliberately did not walk up here by myself. I walked up here with the chair of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, my friend Rich Desmond. Give him a hand. Now, so what we're going to do is we're going to arm wrestle to see who is most at fault or in charge. I think it is really important that Supervisor Desmond and I actually be here together with all of you, with county leadership, with city leadership, because it is a new day in Sacramento, and it needs to be a new day in the state of California. Homelessness is the crisis of our time. We all know it, and the people we all represent we all have the same constituents. They're all suffering the same. Certainly the people who live unsheltered in squalor, who are ill, are suffering. But our communities are suffering as well. And intentionally or not, and I think mostly unintentionally, because counties and cities are different bodies with different governing bodies, different cultures, different traditions, that there hasn't always, and certainly in Sacramento it's true, there has not always been the level of purposeful collaboration, mission-driven collaboration that there needs to be if we are going to make the public see and feel something different while helping thousands of additional people along the way. And it's not that anybody's bad. Certainly the cities need to own up to the fact that in many cities we have a challenge with siting more housing and more affordable housing. And there's a lot of resistance to doing so. And yet the cities say, and I'm going to turn over to Rich in a moment, that we aren't the mental health or substance abuse providers. We don't have that infrastructure. And so we cannot possibly deal with the social condition on our own. And so after years of some struggle that maybe is not unique to Sacramento, in late 2022, the city and county came together not just in words, with handshakes and saying, let's all try to do better together. But instead, we actually negotiated and agreed on a binding partnership agreement that lays out with great specificity the city role, the county role, a commitment together with the health plans, by the way, to add dozens of additional encampment engagement workers and teams, each with mental health clinicians funded by the county, to get in there and to help navigate as many people as we can off of our streets into a better path to end their homelessness. And so we now have a foundation that is profound and that gives us more hope than we have had in a long, long time, because we cannot do it alone, and neither can the county. It's only together that we can deliver what the people expect. Let me turn it over to Rich, and maybe I'll come back with one closing thought. Go ahead.
I'm sure you will, Mayor. Thank you. It's a relationship that is forged by the fire of this crisis that we're all collectively facing. And thank you. It is really an honor for me to be here and welcome you all to Sacramento. And you know, the one thing I take out of this, us coming together for this historic summit, first time ever, is it's a reason to hope. I talk to my constituents and about this, and the first thing they say is, well, what the hell took you so long to come together and get together over this? But it is finally an acknowledgement collectively that we cannot do this alone. The county, the cities cannot do it alone, and I love that what we have done, I think, is it's a microcosm to, I think, what we're trying to do on a state level here. And we have a lot of great things in this partnership agreement that was forged, and you mentioned some of the tension. The tension was actually, there was a lot of tension, and you've probably experienced a lot of that in your cities and counties with this push and pull and maybe some finger pointing and maybe some media, fueling the flames a little bit about who should be doing what. It took a while to get over that. But now we are on a much better path, and I think that's the path that we are establishing today on a statewide level. None of us are laboring under the delusion that this improved coordination is a panacea. We are not patting ourselves on the back. We know this is only a step in the right direction, because we can have all the good relations, all the coordination in the world, and it doesn't mean anything until we have more housing along the continuum, more behavioral health resources along the continuum to navigate someone to. But I am very proud to be part of that discussion, very proud to be here today, very proud of my relationship and friendship with Mayor Steinberg, and I just want to welcome all of you here today, and I hope we all walk away from this with a better relationship between each other in our respective municipalities, and a better approach that brings hope and optimism to the people of the state of California. Thank you.
One more thing. Thank you, Rich. So I also just want to make sure that we thank the CSAC leadership and the league leadership, not only for this convening, but for, I hate the cliche, thinking outside of that proverbial box and really understanding that what we have all done from a state level, from a county level, and from a city level is not enough. And this is the one comment I want to make in closing. We need more money. However, I know that would get an applause. However, I am absolutely convinced that the key to the kingdom, the key to winning the fight for more money is accountability, but accountability not defined in some esoteric way, because we use that word way too loosely, but accountability that shows that in word and in deed, that cities and counties are actually coordinating, that they are actually merging resources functionally or otherwise, that they are working as teams. Until that happens to greater scale, even in Sacramento, I think the public is going to be, and the legislature and the governor, I think, are certainly going to be loath to hear the argument about more money. More money will follow systems changes and better results. Thank you.
And with that, I'm told to turn it over to your League of Cities Executive Director, Carolyn.
To Supervisor Desmond and Mayor Steinberg, thank you for your passion and your commitment and your teamwork. I have to say, the city officials in the room, you know, in a different setting, I might say that Mayor Steinberg was my favorite mayor. But since there are so many of you here, and I love you all, I will just tell you it's great to have him as my mayor here in Sacramento. Well, what would addressing homelessness be without hearing the federal and the state, hearing perspectives from those two levels of government? Several of you heard me say this morning that our cities and our counties, we can work well together, but we cannot solve this challenge alone. We need our state partners. We need a partner in the state, and we also need a federal partner. So I am delighted today to introduce to you two folks, one from the federal government, they're here to help, and one from the state government, who is also a good friend. So first I'd like to introduce Helene Schneider. She is to my immediate left. Helene is a good friend of Cal Cities, and many of you know her from a previous life. Today she serves as the Senior Regional Advisor for the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. She works at the federal level, but she's no stranger, as I said, to California local governments. For over 17 years, she served in municipal government as a mayor, as a city council member, and as a housing authority commissioner for the city of Santa Barbara, California. Anyone from Santa Barbara here? Okay, they're all home working, but we're going to take these good lessons back to them. As an elected official, Helene focused on affordable housing policies and best practices in ending homelessness. In her tenure in local government, she served as Policy Council Chair on the countywide Homelessness Collaborative Board. She chaired the U.S. Conference of Mayors Hunger and Homelessness Task Force, and she served on our very own League of California Cities Board of Directors. Please join me in welcoming Helene to the program. Go ahead and introduce. But before you hear from Helene,
It's all good.
I also want to introduce our second speaker today, and that is Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramírez. You know, the Secretary and I have a mutual friend in San Antonio who for a number of years now has been trying to connect us and get us together. I just didn't think we'd do it in front of all of our closest friends, but it's finally good to be in the room with you. Governor Newsom appointed Secretary Castro Ramírez to serve as the Secretary of the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency in March of 2020. Remember that time, March of 2020. She leads and oversees 11 entities responsible for expanding affordable housing, developing comprehensive solutions to end homelessness, guarding civil rights protections, regulating banking and financial services, and strengthening consumer protections with the licensing of nearly 4 million working professionals. Secretary Castro Ramírez currently serves on the California Strategic Growth Council, the California Housing Finance Agency, and importantly, she co-chairs California's Interagency Council on Homelessness. She has held notable and prominent positions, including being appointed by a former president to lead the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Office of Public and Indian Housing. She's been president and CEO of the San Antonio Housing Authority, director at the LA City Housing Authority, overseeing rental assistance and residence development programs, and most recently serving as president of the University Health System Foundation in San Antonio. I read all of those things about both of our speakers because I can tell you that they know quite a bit about housing and homelessness, what's working, and what the challenges are. And while we're going to hear a little bit from them, I'm hoping that we'll have a few minutes left over for some questions, because I think it's also important for them to hear about the barriers, some of the barriers and successes that you all are having working in your local communities, so they can take that back and have it inform their work. So now, without further ado, Helene, I'll welcome you to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn, and it's really great to be here in connection with Cal Cities, and thanks CSAC also for the conversations that we've had recently and moving forward to getting things done. And what a great turnout here today, which is fabulous to see both city and county leaders together, because we have a lot of work to do, and we each have our own expertise in how to get that done. And as Mayor Steinberg was also saying, we have our role to play, and we have to let each other play that role. So I've been with USICH, and I'll talk about what the heck is that thing in a minute, because I know it's a very small interagency, federal interagency that not many people know about, but we're getting known more and more, even though we're more than 35 years old. But we put together a federal strategic plan, and we put it out last December, called All In, looking at an all-of-government approach, but not just government, community leaders, faith-based groups, business leaders, all in together to prevent and end homelessness in America, and leveraging different ideas and expertise together to make that happen. Part of this federal strategic plan includes a very bold, ambitious goal of reducing homelessness nationwide 25% by 2025. And we know there is no way that we can get anywhere near that goal without California. And there is no way we can do that in California without the political will of mayors, city council members, supervisors, and elected leaders up and down the state, and their allies and partners. So we are focusing on leading a nation in which no one has to experience the tragedy and indignity of homelessness, and everyone has a safe, stable, and accessible and affordable home. And I want to quote someone, when we did the listening sessions in preparation for this plan, we did about 80 listening sessions around the country, both virtually and in person. It was 2020-ish, 2021, and obviously COVID was giving us the opportunities to do a lot of things virtually, and there was that window of time where you could do some things in person. But there was a person with lived experience right here in Sacramento, and I think says a lot of what it is that we need to think about in looking through their lens and their experiences. And this person said, "It is time that we quit blaming people and start blaming bad policy that has displaced people since the beginning of time." and that it's a systemic change that we're talking about. And I think each and every one of you know that you do great work on an individual level, connecting people what they need with the services and the housing what they need, assuming you have the resources to give it to them. It's the systemic issue that we're trying to deal with at the federal, the state, and the local level. So what is USICH? Very, very briefly, and you can go to usich.gov for a whole lot of information. We've been around since the late 80s, and we are a standalone federal interagency. Our council comprises of 19 different federal departments. So the ones that you may think of like HUD, HHS, the VA, education, but also FEMA's involved, also Department of Interior, the Department of Defense, the White House Domestic Policy Council, AmeriCorps is part of this, the Treasury Department. So our job, as I like to describe it, as the hub of the 19-spoke wheel to keep the issue moving forward and to keep us connected with each other at the federal level. My role is a senior regional advisor. There's 6 of us around the country that connect what goes on in DC with local communities, but more importantly, understand what's going on in local communities so we can relay that information up to DC. I just get the state of California, which is plenty, and it's wonderful, and I get to do it from still from Santa Barbara, but still then connect and do peer-to-peer calls and those kind of things throughout with my other colleagues who have other states and services in their region. So just to go really briefly, and please feel free to go and check in with me later. I'll be around all afternoon, but also look at our website about the full federal strategic plan to prevent and end homelessness. And this is just basically this visual you have here. What we did was look at things and look at 6 different pillars. We're 3 foundational pillars: equity, evidence, and collaboration, and 3 solution pillars: housing and supports, homelessness response, and prevention. Across all the pillars, if you look in the plan, there are many strategies, there's actions, there's things that each one of you could look at, and maybe there are 3 or 4 that are working or you're talking about in your community to leverage what's going on at the federal level and to then weave in what's happening in your own community as well. But to briefly just go over them, and I think what's really exciting, and I want to congratulate CSAC on the recent at-home plan that just went out recently. I'd like to say we are all in at home. It sounds really nice to weave it in that way, but there is a lot of parallels and alignment there. Looking at foundation pillars, that how we do things, leading with equity, looking at accountability and transparency is one of the A and the T of at home. For us, in terms of leading with equity, being intentional in our efforts, so the strategies and actions within that pillar focuses on ensuring that federal efforts to prevent and end homelessness promote and advance equity, and to do that with a strong sense of understanding the data and the evidence behind it, to inform our decision making and policy development, to involve strengthening the federal government's capacity to collect, use, and share data while also working to build state and local capacity. We know, and we've heard from you, how hard it is sometimes to deal with the federal government. Boy, that's probably something no one's ever said before. But we understand, even within the federal government, issues and data systems don't talk to each other and need to. And how can we then leverage that with what goes on at the state and the local level? Moving on to look at collaboration, we're right here today. The collaboration piece is such an important part of it. And I want to put out a shout out to your continuums of care as well, and to show them some love as well. They also are now getting significant funding from the state, thankfully, and that alignment of cities, counties, and continuums of care together to harness that funding together to create a plan. I know At Home looks at that as well in terms of leveraging that funding as well and being as coordinated as you can. Then looking at the solution supports of housing and supports, I mean, there's no question that the fundamental solution to homelessness is housing. And this pillar is focusing on strategies and actions to increase the supply of affordable and accessible housing and ensuring that we are maximizing the use of existing housing assistance and looking at the support systems that need to help people be successful in that housing. The housing and the support systems need to be at a level that works for each individual involved, and what one person may need, another person may need something slightly different, but that continual funding source, that continual piece of combining both the housing and supports is so important. The other solution pillar of a crisis response, there's of course looking at unsheltered homelessness, and we know that this is a major, major issue in California. Most of what I talk about when I talk with local communities is about unsheltered homelessness. And so it's not just about how to address unsheltered homelessness in a way that is humane, that is effective, that is productive, that doesn't criminalize those who are most at need and most vulnerable, and to do so in a way that they can move from being in an unsheltered capacity into some form of housing with supports. And so looking at all the variety of things that you're looking at now in terms of interim housing care, shelters, non-congregate shelters, the work that you did during COVID, we were so concerned on a nationwide level when COVID first hit about outbreaks that would happen throughout the country or the world really, but looking at the United States among people who experienced homelessness. And in major part due to local leaders, there was not the level of widespread spread of COVID amongst people experiencing homelessness as we originally feared, because of the work you did creating non-congregate shelter, because of the work you did in connecting them to health care, and the opening eyes that we had that housing, homelessness, and health care together, such a strong issue that needs to be coordinated and combined. But then finally, prevention, and really for counties, this is where a huge part of your day-to-day work happens in terms of preventing homelessness before it even starts. And not at the point of just before a crisis, although that is important. We know about that, but looking way upstream of things that you are already doing in your day-to-day work, how does that relate to preventing homelessness? So for example, thinking about the foster care system. Right, in any given year, nationwide, almost 20,000 foster youth age out of the system, and between 31 and 46% of them experience homelessness by the age of 26. That's unacceptable, right? We know who these individuals are. We know that they're in the system. We know that when they're going to be aged out. What can we do to prevent that from happening in the first place? Looking at veterans, for example, 6.9% of adults experiencing homelessness are veterans. Veteran women are more than twice as likely as non-veteran women to experience homelessness. We know who they are. They served our country. We need to make sure that they never, ever spend a night outside of a safe and stable place to call home. One of the things the Biden administration's budget proposal is including, I just wanted to highlight before turning it over to the Secretary, is a newly created housing voucher guarantee, both for youth aging out of foster care and extremely low-income veterans. Basically saying, if you need a place to live, you have one. We have a lot of work to get there, and on the way we want to do that. I'm hoping to learn a lot from you today. Please do reach out, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak this afternoon.
Well, it's always great to follow Helene, because I think it's important to set the stage in terms of the federal priorities, particularly with the rollout of the all-in strategic federal plan, to really understand how the federal government is all in across multiple federal agencies addressing homelessness. But core to this is addressing housing insecurity, housing affordability, and access to housing. And to a similar extent at the state level, and Carolyn mentioned this, I serve as co-chair of the California Interagency Council on Homelessness. It's a very similar structure to the USICH. I am a co-chair with Secretary Galley, who heads our Health and Human Services agency. And we really sort of come at this work from a housing, a health, and a human services perspective. And so I share that early on because I think that as I provide my remarks in terms of the work, the priorities, and the progress that we're making at the state level, just want to make sure that there's a level sort of connection of how this is an all-of-government effort, working at the federal level, at the state level, and of course in partnership with each of you at the local level. And Carolyn, so good to meet you in person. We've met virtually, but this is our first time actually meeting in person. Carolyn alluded to a common friend, and prior to this role, stepping into Secretary of BCSH, the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, I lived in San Antonio, Texas, and I worked closely with Mayor Nuremberg, who at that time asked that I chair a task force to look at the 10-year outlook as it relates to housing. And so we put together a 10-year housing plan with a focus on addressing, some of the same issues that we're tackling here today. So it's good to be together finally. I do want to, of course, acknowledge the tremendous leadership of the League of Cities and the work that the California State Association of Counties is continuing to do and lead when it comes to addressing housing insecurity and homelessness. And, as Carolyn mentioned, in my capacity, I oversee a number of different entities across the state. But today, I'm here as the housing secretary for the state. And in this capacity, I'm leading a multi-agency effort that focuses on coordinating homelessness from the prevention side to intervention to addressing to ending homelessness, and largely through the work that we're doing in terms of expanding housing that is affordable, accessible, and dignified for Californians. We're also, of course, working not just on multifamily rental units, but we're also looking to expand opportunities for homeownership. And over the last few years, so the conversation today is, what's the state, what's the role of the state? What have we been doing at the state level over the last few years to address these issues? We've been busy. We've been very busy, working in partnership with each of you and with your communities, creating pathways that have led to positive outcomes for people experiencing homelessness, with housing as the foundation for lasting change. In my role as, I guess maybe as a former community planner, community builder, I make every effort to get out of my office, to visit rural, urban, tribal, suburban communities. And I do this because I think it's important to bridge policy and practice with real feedback from people on the ground. That helps us get better as policymakers, as administrators, and it also helps us course correct more quickly, right? So in February, I was in Riverside, where I had an opportunity to meet with Mayor Dawson, and I also had an opportunity to meet with several residents of a home key community called Project Legacy. Project Legacy is a state-funding home key community that provides affordable housing and supportive services with a focus on unhoused LGBTQ youth, seniors, and individuals living with HIV. I had an opportunity to have conversations with a number of the residents, and in particular, I want to share something that was shared with me by one of the residents. She was very grateful. She was very grateful to be living in a place that she saw as a supportive community. And she described this place, and I'm going to quote from her, as a foundation for people in dark places, a little rainbow, which the world needs. And I was struck by that phrase, a foundation which the world needs, because that's exactly what we all have been working towards, building stronger foundations, and it begins with having a permanent, affordable, and accessible place for people to come home. Project Legacy is one of more than 200 housing communities funded through Home Key. In just 2 years, with your support and engagement, we have created 13,000 homes. 13,000. These are interim and permanent homes in 2 years. And this is an example of what's possible when we align policy, funding, and implement person-centered housing solutions. Nearly $2 billion has been awarded through Home Key to date. And just last week, Governor Newsom announced the third round of Home Key funding. We have $736 million that's available. We will begin accepting applications April the 24th. Yes, we can clap for that. We will begin accepting applications April the 24th. It is over the counter, and so I would encourage you all to talk to your local housing authorities, to your housing folks, and to line up for submitting an application. HomeKey is just one of the many examples of how California is partnering with local communities to expand affordable housing more quickly for people in need. It's no secret, this is why I think we're all here, that housing and homelessness are two of California's most pressing issues, with low-income families, particularly Black, Indigenous, and Latino families, hurting the most because of the lack of housing that's affordable and dignified. For every 100 low-income working households, there are only 30 affordable and available homes in our state. And almost 80% of extremely low-income households are spending more than half of their income on housing costs, with many just one paycheck away from becoming homeless. The solution is yes, it's more housing. We need to continue the momentum to build more housing. That's why the governor and this administration have been laser focused on building more housing that's affordable, more housing that provides the supports for people to exit homelessness. And what had we accomplished thus far in the last few years? In housing, over the last 4 years, we've streamlined state bureaucracy, consolidated housing programs, developed new production models, dedicated resources and tools, designed pro-housing designations. We now have 22 jurisdictions that have attained the pro-housing designation at the state. And we've established strong housing accountability measures to meet our housing goals. We're witnessing also significant progress in terms of fast-tracking affordable housing through the SB 35 streamlining authority that was provided. And we're also seeing a greater production of other sort of non-traditional housing types like ADUs. In 2016, we had 2,000 units that were permitted for ADU construction. By 2021, we had 20,000. Again, we could not have done this without your leadership, without your engagement and involvement, mayors, city councils, county board of supervisors, and the thousands of dedicated people in local government working to meet housing goals and putting an end to homelessness. And it's because of your leadership at the local level that we're making good progress. And this is not the time for us to slow down. And yet, we're, of course, entering into very difficult fiscal times, right? And so we have to continue to stay creative, to look at ways to leverage other funding sources, including leveraging funding from at the federal level. We're also delivering, I know I've been told that I have a couple minutes, but I'm not done yet. So, sorry. It's hard to summarize what's happened in the last 4 years, right? And I do think it's important to take stock so that as we move forward, right, we're building on what you all have accomplished. We're delivering unprecedented state resources to communities to accelerate the production of affordable housing. It's been very satisfying to see local governments make much great use of these resources. We're also, of course, very focused on aligning our housing finance system. That includes making sure that the low-income housing tax credit program is aligned to the priorities that this administration has established. And the results that we're seeing on the ground because of these programs is promising, with nearly 80,000 permanent affordable homes created, under construction, or in the pipeline in the last 3 years. The return of these housing investments, and I want to make sure that I make this point because I think we often focus on how much is it costing to build a unit, but I don't think we focus enough in terms of the fact that this affordable unit is affordable for the next 55 years, and that it will serve 7 different guests, that it will serve at a minimum 7 different families over time. So I think we need to call attention to what we're investing in. We're investing in homes that families will be able to afford and where they will not need to pay more than 30% of their income, right? So this is a significant investment that will have long-term impact over 55 years. And the last point in terms of investments is also the work that we're doing to address encampments, to put resources and support and technical assistance, and to work with each of you in addressing encampments. This year, the Encampment Resolution Fund program was expanded to distribute $240 million to support local communities, connect people living in encampments to holistic housing and supports. Here again, you all showed up. Just 3 weeks ago, we received over 50 applications for $240 million. My team is reviewing those applications as we speak. We hope to be able to make awards fairly soon. But again, we are providing the resources that we know are needed in the community, and you're rising to the occasion and leveraging those resources to provide the level of support, the level of housing, and the level of long-term sort of resiliency that families will need. And so just as I conclude, let me speak to you briefly about the California Interagency Council on Homelessness and the work that we're doing. In 2022, the council was essentially reconstituted to, in some ways, reflect what the USICH model. Our council is made up of 18 different state entities, both agencies and departments. We are very much focused on housing, health, and human services. The State Council just last year updated the statewide action plan for preventing and ending homelessness in our state. And the focus is on health, education, veterans, emergency services, and other resources that these 18 state entities are responsible for. We also now have a way of taking a look at the homelessness response system across the state. In 2021, we launched the state's homeless data integration system, which basically pulls together data from the 44 continuums of care across the state. And having this data enables us to better understand who's being served through the homelessness response system. Also enables us to understand the outcomes, the best practices, what is being achieved right at the local level. As many of you know, last year we implemented local homelessness action plans that are tied to HAP funding. And these local homelessness action plans require the use of HDIS data as the baseline for establishing the planning that needs to happen at the local level, for establishing the priorities, and also for establishing the performance metrics which are tied to the HUD homelessness system performance metrics. Through these plans, cities and counties, continuums of care, and regional partners are empowered to work collaboratively to define roles, responsibilities, and to prioritize local solutions to achieve greater outcomes and to establish targeted interventions for communities that are overrepresented in the homelessness system. In the most recent HAP application process, we were excited to see that California communities have come together and committed to a 15% reduction in homelessness by 2025. The State Council will continue to model a collaborative approach through the work that we're doing in aligning housing, health, and human services, and also expanding the spectrum of support. And just as I conclude, I started with the importance of getting out into community and talking to people about the way that they're leveraging state investments. And I just want to leave you with 3 sort of best practices, 3 examples of what I have seen is working well and what I would encourage you all to continue doing in your communities. First, make use of innovative partnerships. For example, many of you have partnerships with jails, with the Sheriff's Department, with child welfare agencies, and institutions of higher education. Critically important. Secondly, as a former housing authority person, work with your local housing authority, right, to increase voucher utilization, to expand housing options for people experiencing homelessness, leverage those vouchers to maximize the capital investments that you're making in your local community. We've seen great success through HomeKey, where 1/4 of all of the HomeKey units were developed because housing authorities were at the table. They were committing vouchers, both project-based, tenant-based, and VASH vouchers. And then finally, as many of you are already doing, continue to remove local barriers to development. Look at ways to speed up the development process, especially if the housing that is being developed is affordable. So with that, this is our moment to continue to say yes, yes to housing, to partner together to build upon the foundation that we have already laid, and to achieve our collective mission of improving the lives of our neighbors through vibrant, inclusive, and affordable communities. Gracias. Thank you for the invitation to be here.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you, Helene. As we bring this panel to a close, first off, let's say thank you to our panelists. And don't worry, Secretary, she's looking at me too, so I'll be quick. I hope that the takeaway from these two speakers, one is that we're making progress. We have a long way to go. We have a lot of work to do, but we're making progress. And we couldn't have that progress without the partnership of the state and federal government. Two things, one from each of them that struck me. Helene said, let's stop blaming people and start blaming bad policy. And I think she'd follow that with, and let's have the political will, let's muster the political will to make the changes in the policy that we need to make so that it works for our folks and not against them. That's okay, you can applaud for that too. And Secretary left us with something pretty profound, that housing is a foundation for people in dark places. It's a rainbow that the world needs. Thank you both for your time today, for being such great partners. And now it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage my county partner, Graham Knaus, the Executive Director of CSAC.
Good afternoon. First, I just want to thank Carolyn for her partnership, her friendship, and that's true on things that are easy. It's also true on things that are not so easy. Hard things are hard, that's right. Cal Cities is in very good hands with Carolyn Coleman and her team. I am incredibly excited about today, about the filling up of this room, because homelessness is it's certainly about people, it's certainly about policy, but it's also about purpose, and it's about community, and it's about our individual responsibility and our collective responsibility to make change and to improve those communities. That's why this joint session has occurred. And so I applaud all the leaders in the room, county, city, and I'm sure there's some others that are here too, for your commitment to making change in your community, for your willingness to get uncomfortable on an incredibly complex issue where we know the policy is not working and we know that there's a better path, that there's another way that we can make progress together, and that begins with local government coming together, to pushing on the state, to helping the state partner with us, and to doing the same at the federal level. And I have no question in my mind, no doubt in my mind, that the leadership and the commitment in this room will make change happen on homelessness this year. So let's model some collaboration and hear from some folks in urban communities that are leading on this very issue, both on the county side and with cities. And I'm going to invite up Hannah Wiley, who is an award-winning political reporter from the LA Times. Here she comes on up towards the stage. The LA Times, the largest news organization in the state. A number of us have had interactions with Hannah. Some have been very challenging because she's doing her job. It's all good. But really excited to have her here today to moderate this panel on urban perspectives around homelessness. To join us up here, we're also thrilled to have former Senator and now LA County Supervisor Holly Mitchell, San Diego County Supervisor Nora Vargas, and staying within the confines of San Diego County, the Chula Vista Mayor John McCann is here with us as well. So they're going to share some insights and perspective in terms of what's happening in their communities related to this. That will be of value to all of us in this room. Hannah is going to guide us through this conversation. So ladies and gentlemen, Hannah Wiley.
Well, thank you three for being here. Thank you all for being here. I'm Hannah Wiley, Los Angeles Times reporter, and I cover housing, homelessness, and not a week goes by, obviously, that I'm not writing about this crisis and all of your efforts here at the state level and local level to try and solve it. So to start, you three represent some of the largest counties and cities in the state, and with Los Angeles, the largest. So while homelessness is a statewide problem, I'd like to hear about some of the unique challenges that your local communities face and how you're currently working to address them.
So good afternoon, everyone. First of all, let me say yesterday I woke up with back spasms, and I thought, this is the first time the League of Cities and CSAC have met together jointly. I can't miss that. So I'm full of salon paws and everything. So if you see me moving a little awkward, but I wouldn't go miss it, Graham, because I'm like, it might be another 100 years before these organizations come together. So I better just get on this plane and grin and bear it. So it's wonderful to see a room full of local government leaders, all of us doing our best to provide services and care to our shared constituency. And it's great to see some of my former colleagues from the state legislature. I'm a third-generation Native Angelino, so I am and continue to be really happy to come home full-time and to come home to focus on issues that I consider my bread and butter issues. So LA County, there's 5 of us who try to meet the needs of 10 million plus each and every day. And what does that mean? That means that we've got approximately 69,000 unhoused experiencing houselessness every day. Of those, a little over 29,000 live with substance abuse and or serious mental illness. So for us, the main challenge is getting to scale quickly on both housing and services. We are, of course, a proud housing first model county. I say that since I carried the housing first legislation in the state of California, so it would be a little awkward if we were not. And from my perspective, you know, the barriers to housing and accessing services, using housing first as a model it fundamentally reduces them. The challenge is having enough housing options. That's the critical issue for LA, having enough options. You know, the reality is housing needs are as diverse as our unhoused population. If we were to poll all of us here, all of us have different unique housing circumstances that we live in for ourselves. When I made the decision 22 years ago to buy a duplex, it was because I was a single adoptive parent with an aging parent. And so the notion of having a space for my mother to, you know, grow old with dignity and help me with the toddler was critically important. All of us have made decisions for ourselves to meet our own family needs. And what we build have to meet the needs of our unhoused family, friends, and neighbors too. So we've had to grow up and mature in terms of how we think, what we build, where we build it, and for whom. And so for LA, I think it's getting to scale quickly. making sure that through the Housing First model, we're building a diverse spectrum of housing to meet the needs of all of our unhoused.
So wonderful to be with all of you. Buenas tardes. It is really a wonderful opportunity to have this conversation today. And my name is Nora Vargas, and I happen to be the first Latina on the San Diego County Board of Supervisors in its 200 years. And I share that with you because I think it matters and because I think it's important. I represent a district where, 650,000 people or so for the County of San Diego. As the chair of the board, I represent 3.3 million people. We are 18 cities, and unincorporated areas about over 570,000 people. And so we have a very unique community because of where we are in the border region, because of who we are in terms of representing unincorporated areas and these 18 cities and the partnerships that have to come. And I also represent a new, a very different type of leadership in a county that for many years did not prioritize our unsheltered population. And so when we talk about what the challenges are that we have, is we are trying as a board to change an institution that for years had a lot of systemic challenges, an institution that wasn't created by many of us or for many of us. And so the priority for me in the last 2 years as one of the newest board members has really been to think about how do we change some of these policies long term. Now, I will say that we're very lucky to have about 20,000 employees in the County of San Diego that have prioritized this work, but the leadership wasn't there from the board. And that leadership has changed. And I think, or I will say I know, that this is why the at-home initiative is so important for us as counties, because it shouldn't matter who's sitting, right, on that dais. I know we all think we're really important and powerful, and it's fantastic. But the real reality is that we need to make institutional change. And I've been very fortunate to serve as the representative for CSAC now in the last 2 years, and have been there from the inception of what the at-home pillars were going to look like. And so I want to give a big shout out to all of my colleagues who have been part of this process from day one, because we've been very thoughtful about what that looks like for our rural, our suburban communities and our unincorporated areas, and really thinking about an initiative that really looks at us, that has the flexibility, the ability to have real conversations about what this looks like. So for us in the County of San Diego is really thinking about what can we do so that we can continue to partner with the federal and state government to bring additional resources. I'm really proud to share with you that in a really short amount of time, this board has introduced 32 board letters to begin to create real systemic change in the County of San Diego, from ensuring we declared homelessness a public health care crisis, which is something that I led last year in November, to ensuring that we have a database system and a dashboard that actually holds us accountable to be able to use this work and make sure that we are trying to find out how many beds we have available or not. And then most recently, partnering with the district attorney, and there's been some conversation about what that looks like with our district attorney to make sure that there is no bed left unused, right? And how do we hold ourselves accountable for that? And we know there's a model right now called TechSoup, but we're working with them to try to figure out how do we make sure that every bed is being used. But I think the other part that's important to share is that, I happen to have some of the best cities in my district. Hey. I know Mayor Pinto's here from not my city, but I still love him. But anyway, but the city of Chula Vista is the second largest city in the County of San Diego. I think when people think about County of San Diego, they think only about the city of San Diego. Mayor Todd Gloria and I have a great partnership. We do wonderful work together. He was a state legislator as well, understands the process. But I think it's a lot of the other smaller cities, although Chula Vista is not really small, that need to be part of this conversation. And I think that's where the at-home initiative is going to create those really great partnerships for us to work together. And through this process, we'll be able to share more. But I'll tell you, it has been since, I think, 1990-something beginning that we've been working with the city of Chula Vista, in 2000s, with the city of Chula Vista to really begin to move our work forward to address our unsheltered population. And I have a lot of information to share, and I'm sure the mayor will too, about how we're working collaboratively with our nonprofit organizations, with our law enforcement and first responders to really address the needs in our communities. And I think that is what the foundation of the at-home initiatives are, and really thinking about, how do we work together, who's responsible for what, and really thinking about how we move forward. And I think it's really important to share that although our seats are both nonpartisan, we come from different parties, but we work really well together because in the end, it's about meeting the need of our communities, and that is really the goal that we have in the County of San Diego.
I'm very honored to be up here with Chair Supervisor Nora Vargas. She really is somebody special, so please give her a round of applause. Going to tell a little bit of a story. When I grew up in Chula Vista, we were about 60,000 people. Now we're almost 300,000. I always get told, no, we're 277,000. But I think in the next decade, we'll be over 300,000. When I grew up in Chula Vista, we had one homeless person. And Dane was his name, and his family lived in the area. And he would walk around, and he'd grow a beard and grow long hair. And then every once in a while, he'd sort of get taken in, get cleaned up. But that was the reality of the homeless. And over the last decade, we've seen homeless become a major problem for every city in the state of California. And we need to be able to put together solutions to be able to take care of our homeless, get them off the streets, and be able to help them get back on their feet. And this is, again, not a one-size-fits-all problem. As you all know, issues of homelessness can be family issues. It can become loss of a job. It can become a medical issue, can become a psychological issue, can become a dependence issue on drugs or alcohol, or a wide variety of combinations of all those things. And so what we need to do is we need to be able to implement programs that help be able to address each of those options. And as you know, one size does not fit all. In the city of Chula Vista, we're very fortunate in 2016 to be able to create a homeless outreach team, a HOT team, and we believe that it was the best of breed program because we would have several social workers. They would go out, engage the homeless, but they would be there with a law enforcement officer, and they would have a PERT clinician, thank you, paid by the San Diego County. And what would happen is they would intervene and engage homeless at least on a weekly basis to be able to find out what they could do to be able to offer housing, offer services. We've now gone to the next level. We're building a bridge shelter. We're hoping it will be open in a couple months here. We want to thank again the San Diego County for helping contribute about $2 million to be able to build that shelter. 66 units. They're each small little bungalows. Even if you're unsheltered, you want to have a area where you want to be able to have your own privacy. You also may have a pet, so you want to be able to bring in your pet. And you may have children or a loved one to be able to live in the same facility. With that, these bungalows will then be surrounded with many services. CityNet was the nonprofit that we've went ahead and did an RFP. We looked at what their options and opportunities were. They had the highest success rate of getting people back on their feet and back into normal society. So not just providing a house, but also being able to provide them the wraparound services to be able to give them opportunities on how they can get better. So there are many things that we need to be able to do, but the key is we need to be able to be collaborative. Again, Nora Vargas, our supervisor, has been tremendous in being a great partner, being able to use state, federal funds. We need to be able to work together because this is a major issue for homeless, and we have to be able to work together as a team to make sure that we solve it. Thank you.
That is actually, go ahead. There we go. That is actually the perfect segue here. And I want to be mindful of time because we have lots of questions and I think roughly 10 minutes left. So firing them off. So, you know, a common issue in my reporting that comes up is the relationship that cities and counties have with each other, especially on something so large as solving homelessness, right? So a huge example last year, and we can get into the details later, but Care Court, right? Cities supported it. Counties raised a lot of concern over funding and how the services would be provided and the workforce, right? So how do you foster those strong relationships between the cities and the counties so that when an idea like Care Court comes about or a bold initiative, a big initiative to try to address some of the things that we see, how do you work together? How do you foster that really strong relationship? Mayor, do you want to start this time?
Sure, I'll be able to. When you need to be able to get anything done, there are always challenges and obstacles. And if you're truly committed, you need to continue to work together. And that's, I think, one of the things that, as the city of Chula Vista, we've been very, very committed at doing. I know many of you are elected officials. When I ran for office this last time, again, homeless had never really been an issue, but homeless was the #1 issue when I ran for mayor. In addition, when I would walk precincts, I was amazed to see how many neighborhoods I would go and knock on people's doors and they say, yeah, you know, we have this homeless issue. And I go, okay. And they go, we've got this guy down on our street who's living out of his car. And this was not just one neighborhood. This were multiple neighborhoods. And so we were able to then be able to look at using the home key funds to build a hotel in the future, be able to use their parking lot potentially for safe parking. But when you're looking at these issues, these are issues that are very, very challenging. And this is where, again, maybe I'm just old school, but you need to be able to come together, find out what you agree on, move forward on what you can agree on, and sometimes you just have to be able to compromise to be able to get things done.
Thank you, Mayor. And so I think that's sort of the foundation, and I'm not, you know, look, I am here to not sell you at home, but I am. Because let me tell you why this matters, right? When we come, and I come from the world of advocacy before becoming a supervisor, and I think it's extremely important to emphasize the power of policy initiatives and being able to have responsibility, accountability, so that we can actually create policies that are going to be sustainable, right? I mean, right now, we have a great relationship with Mayor Gloria and a great relationship with Mayor McCann, right? Different parties, great relationship. But I can't say that for some other cities in my county. And some other cities in my county have decided that they don't have a homeless issue, even though they're one of the richest cities in the county. Or I have, you know, I mean, people have said things like that, or that they don't want our unsheltered population in their cities, and they can choose to do that. And so that is not okay, that is not fair, and we can't make policy just based on the fact that you and I get along. We need to make sure that we institutionalize what the responsibilities are. I didn't call them mandates. What I call them is really thinking about what are we willing to do together so that it doesn't matter who the person is who's sitting on the dais, but it's actually we're getting the work done, right? when you have models, right, of what's happening in places like Chula Vista and in San Diego, where we have MOUs, where we're meeting the needs, where we're actually being flexible and transformative and ensuring that people have access, those are the kinds of things that we need to be able to do, and that's the kind of policy and legislation that we're trying to really talk about so that it could be much more efficient. I will say that as a county, we declared public health care crisis, homelessness a public health care crisis, as I mentioned last year, and I did that because for the first time in a month or so, we're going to be convening all the 18 cities so that we can actually have a conversation, right, and we're going to use universities so that they can help us have a dialogue so we don't violate the Brown Act, and that people are participating in this process and having real conversation and having the folks on the ground who have the boots on the ground to really make the recommendations. The resources are here right now, and so we need to make sure that we're prioritizing, and we need to make sure that they are very clear paths of who's responsible for what, how do we hold ourselves accountable, because the money and the commitment is there from the federal and state government, and it is our job to implement and to do it right.
I would say, you know, when we say relationship building, it's like, what does that mean? It can sound so nebulous. And what I've also found, coming from now the state level to the local level, whatever level of government you're in, we love to point the finger at the other levels of government and identify how they fall short. If they would just leave us alone, we could do what we need to do. And we all do it. We point at each other. And so I think the reality is acknowledging that we all have a role to play in this humanity crisis that we're experiencing, whether it was the one gentleman who cycled in and out of homelessness in our hometown, or it's the 79,000 in LA County. We all are sharing in this. And so we are going to define relationship building differently. You know, I would say we all have a responsibility to understand our core business and to understand the core business of the other levels of government. At the county level, we provide services. The city level, you're building. And so how do we partner in a meaningful way, understand and respect and value the core business of the other level of government, and get it done? You've heard a lot, I'm sure, about LA County and LA City locked arms. We literally took a picture where Mayor Bass and the 5 women on the Board of Supervisors locked arms. We all declared a state of emergency so we could cut through our own red tape, because what are we? We are bureaucracies, for better or worse, and have really tried to identify 3 priorities: that we have a diversity of housing options, that we have clear roles and responsibilities, and we all stay in our lane. And thirdly, that we have a clear, unified direction. That is just fundamentally important to me because I learned it on a Senate delegation trip to Utah 10, 15 years ago, when I walked around Utah for a couple of days and I couldn't put my finger on what felt different. I just couldn't figure it out. And it hit me and it saddened me when I realized it, because I realized I'd never experienced it before. But it was clear to me that the state, county, and cities in Utah were in perfect alignment. They had made the declarative statement that they were going to reduce homelessness for the chronically homeless by 90% in 10 years. A measurable goal that as elections happen and power shifts happen between parties, it didn't matter. They stayed on message, period. And they achieved their goal. So I think, and it gives me a real sense of pride as a Californian, that we have found that sweet spot here in California. The silver lining of COVID, quite frankly, was additional funds, unprecedented funds to all of us from the federal government. So we've got more money now to fund the innovative programs we've always known work. We just couldn't afford them. This is our time to be in perfect alignment, to work collaboratively. So depends on how, we can all define how do we relationship build differently, but to come up with 2, 3, however many goals you need to, city and county, that you agree on to move forward, I think, is how we make progress and really see market traction in the coming years.
And so we've heard what the counties and the cities can do to really connect and unify on message to address this problem. So let's talk about the state now. And before that, I just want to throw out a couple of numbers because I'm trying here to combine questions with a limited time. So The annual HUD report said that California accounted for half of all unsheltered people in the country, so more than 115,000 people. 67% of people experiencing homelessness did so outdoors. The state now accounts for 30% of all individuals experiencing homelessness in the country. That's at the same time that Governor Newsom has allocated billions of dollars for homelessness in recent years. He likes to say unprecedented amounts, right? And we've continued to see the numbers grow. As local leaders, what more do you need from the state to actually accomplish this vision of helping people get inside and connected to the services that they need? And so the League, I want to also point out their recent survey, the League of California Cities survey said that 87% of responding cities said they were worried about having enough money to provide homeless services for the long run. So they've asked for now $3 billion in ongoing permanent funding. I've heard here that there's unprecedented amounts from the state, from the federal government. There's more money being asked for. But what else? What else does the state need to do to help you accomplish these goals? Supervisor Vargas, do you want to start?
So I think, I think what's really important is to remember that there is no one government agency that can solve homelessness on their own. And so I think that's critical. And we heard from the federal and the state government today. And I think the secretary was very clear about issues around, being innovative and housing vouchers, et cetera, and what can we do with that. But I think for us, as we're looking at, there's been, especially through ARPA, which I am very grateful for that funding that came to us through the federal and state government, right? Honestly, a lot of these initiatives and programs are one-time, funding initiatives, and then there's nothing worse that you can do as a county supervisor is to create a program and then say, oh, sorry, funding is done, I got to take it away from you. Honestly, right? And I'm sure cities would say the same. And as we're trying to address some of the biggest challenges that we face, it's, I think, the need for the state to give us a little bit more flexibility on how we allocate some of those resources and how do we partner up together with the cities. Because in the end, I think that's what makes it so powerful, right? The work that we're doing with the city of Chula Vista is very different than what we're doing in the city of San Diego. City of San Diego is 1.3 million people. Chula Vista is 277,000. So I remember that. It's my district. I walked the whole district, by the way. But it's important, I think, to have that flexibility and because that is, I think, what ties our hands sometimes. And I think I look at our team who is here from the County of San Diego, who's in behavioral health, who is part of our Health and Human Services, our housing. We work really well together, and we're creating these innovative initiatives and programs, but sometimes we're stuck because we're not able to use funding the way we need to be able to use it. So for me, I think that would be the main thing. I will say that through the $10 million Capital Emergency House Solution Grant Program that we received, we were able to create some really great programs in Oceanside, Escondido, Carlsbad, and Chula Vista, and some other areas. So I think there's some good things happening at the state, but I will say that sometimes we end up scrambling, trying to say, we're not going to say no to the money, but how do we get that money, put the resources to work, get everybody moved from one thing to another, right? Because we're not getting more staff. We're not getting more workforce. And so as we're looking at all of these different perspectives, I think it's really important that we think of the long-term solutions versus just short-term solutions because they need to be sustainable as we're moving forward.
This clearly was a question that made me put these salon paws on my back and get here today. It's a critical one. So first of all, let me thank the legislature and the governor for doing what they've done, for acknowledging that this is a humanity crisis and that they had a role to play. I appreciate that. This is my issue, and I hope that we all leave here today practicing how to say this over and over again. I heard my former colleague, Mayor Steinberg, say more money. I also read in the January government budget proposal that they're already projecting a $29 billion deficit. I've been here. I chaired budget committee when we had those deficits, so I know what that looks like. And we all know that the number of unhoused in our districts did not happen overnight. I was here in the legislature during the Great Recession and painfully had to vote for budgets that cut the CalWorks budget, So none of us should be surprised that we're here. And the problem is, when our economy tanks and the state government is broke, the only way we can get through and pass budgets is by cutting services that we know people need in order to stay housed. And so that's counterintuitive. When our constituents need government the most because of the recession, that's also when we're cutting the kinds of programs to help people stay afloat and whole. And we have to be conscious and deliberate in flipping that equation. So my ask of the governor and the legislature is, whatever the deficit is, if you don't give us more money, what you can't do is cut us. We cannot continue to make progress if we have fewer resources from the state. We can't. And so as we move forward, none of us can afford to take our foot off the accelerator, because it will be very easy for us to slip back into a place where we continue to add to the roles of the unhoused. And we have to think organically and broadly about, what programs when we cut. When we cut Medi-Cal, when we cut CalFresh, when we cut CalWorks, we are compromising a family's ability to be housed. We create housing insecurity. Phil Ansell, long-term LA County employee, when I was budget chair, would bring me a chart every year that I would put on my front door, and he showed the increase in the number of homeless CalWorks families. Now, we know CalWorks in statute is designed to keep children from falling into poverty, and we drove families into poverty when we cut that CalWorks grant. We drove them into poverty. And so it was counterintuitive. How CalWorks, it's an entitlement program to keep families together. How is the homeless number of CalWorks families increasing? Because we cut that grant. So my ask is that whatever the deficit, what we cannot do is reduce funding to programs, mainly the entitlement programs, the housing expansion, the support programs that keeps people housed. We all have a churn. Like the gentleman in your hometown gets housed, all of a sudden they're not housed. If you interview families in the unhoused in your communities, most of them can tell you a story. Oh, I was in this program, that program, that program, and they don't stay there. So we have to keep our foot on the accelerator. Once we get them housed, they have to stay housed, and we have to reduce the number of people who lose their housing. So my message to the state legislature is thank you, and don't take our money back.
Mayor, do you want to round us out?
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's the consistent annual funding is what cities and counties need. I can tell my wife you guys applaud for me. It's been great getting one-time funds. Again, we're building our bridge shelter with one-time funds. We have home key funds to be able to purchase a motel, to be able to build a transitional homeless center for that. But each one of these facilities needs to be maintained and needs to be able to be operated on an annual basis for the next 30+ years. We need to be able to have that funding to be able to be successful. And so that is the key thing, is we need to be able to have that annual funding from the state, and we are ready for it. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you all for your time today. Thank you to you three local leaders. We really appreciate hearing your perspective. I appreciate hearing your perspective as a State House reporter. It's really important. You three are making it happen. Thank you to the League. Thank you to CSAC for having us. I've missed my deadline as usual and got us out of here a little bit later than anticipated, but thank you again. And for you three. Yeah.